Recovering our core self. The planetary body is shifting into the higher frequency band that is located in the next harmonic universe. The collective consciousness has been shifting through the layers of the higher dimensional frequency bands quite consistently during the ascension cycle. However, what is happening now has a massive impact on the configuration of the construct that makes up the individual and collective mental bodies. The impact to the three lower layers of the mental body construct generates forces that create intense energetic pressure upon people's bodies, and so that they learn to adjust their 3D ways of thinking, behaving and negative ego coping mechanisms to evolve into the higher mind. Many people may feel the pressure as they are being forced to move past old 3D identities and let go of the false self. As a result of current shifts, all people are being pushed to recognize and feel the differences between the authentic core self and the false identities used to mask pain and trauma. This discernment is needed to help people develop into their higher mental bodies, and so that they can align to the higher frequencies that are transmitting during the current collective consciousness shift. The planetary body is rolling up the lowest three frequency bands, 1D, 2D and 3D. This means that the lower three-dimensional frequency bands will cease to exist in the same way they have on this planet. This produces a massive pressure upon the constructs that exist as the lower mental bodies, which for some people with unhealed trauma, will be felt as surges of electrical pressure on the nervous system that generates even more mental anxiety and physical tension. We are under a lot of pressure to recollect our soul fragments and transform into a new and higher version of ourselves. This pressurized sensation upon our body and mind can bring up feelings of fear as we progress into facing the unknown and overcoming fears of uncertainty and self-doubt. The false self or the false identity is usually formed to generate inner walls in our unconscious mind as a result of unhealed painful trauma and fears. This wall of separation that exists between our unconscious mind and conscious mind hides secret negative beliefs or internal fears that we have collected about ourselves as the result of how we perceived life experiences. For some people, these deeply buried fears and pain is so devastating that they avoid addressing it, as it can sink them into a dark abyss of emotional pain that they do not know how to cope with. To hide from this emotional pain, they develop coping mechanisms to help them better survive in the 3D world of obligations and stress, while living in a culture that emphasizes escapism, which is pain and fear avoidance. People in pain form opposite sets of compensating behaviors, which means they act out behaviors that are actually the opposite of who they really are, and so to keep up appearances or expectations connected to their belief system. These negative habits form into coping mechanisms that help them to deal with the anxiety they feel that is created from past unhealed pain and trauma. These compensating behaviors turn into fear coping mechanisms in order to get through life, people putting up a facade or false identity that they believe other people will accept or love. Or they may be reduced into impersonating other people's behaviors around them in order to feel safe, and other people's behaviors become the mental body architecture that form into the false identity mask that they show to the world. When we allow others the power to dictate to our identity, we become lost, confused and very unhappy. At this time it is important that we not seek to repair and reprogram the false identity mask of the negative ego's pain, that part of our lower mind that has compensated behaviors to hide away our deepest fears that we are unlovable, worthless, or inadequate. It is time to break through the ego walls of separation and fear, to discover the true authentic core self, to recover our core self through unconditional self-love and unconditional self-acceptance. In order to break through the false identity mask and recover our core self, We have to be willing to face the core negative belief we have about ourselves and address the emotional pain that it created. The task for emotional and spiritual healing is to find out what the core pain belief system is and dismantle its control over our behaviors, especially when it has created dual or more false identities as coping mechanisms for fears. This happens when people have separate identities that they show different people, or they adopt a certain personality in a variety of social settings. As an example, the personality behaviors that exist when at home alone and the other personality behaviors that are exhibited in public or in social settings, are either false identities or connected with the authentic core self. These examples of false identities are created in order to meet social expectations or appearances, and this marked change in personality while in private or in public can produce split personalities with splitting behaviors. If we exist in false identities and behave inauthentically, wearing masks in our everyday life, suppressing our true emotions and feelings, we are unable to tell what is real and what is false, and this produces self-delusion, a person that has no core self with little emotional and mental stability. To address our core negative beliefs and core wound, we must look to the frustrations and irritations we feel in everyday life, by listening to the inner dialogue we have that is negative about ourselves, negative about others, negative about our conditions. Many people's core wound is generated in their earliest memories during childhood, and this emotional pain may have been defined in previous lifetimes in similar situations. When the same emotional theme played out and was not resolved and healed, it is replayed into this current lifetime. Drilling down the core wound of unhealed emotional pain and fear takes us into the classic case study of ego walls of separation, feeling disconnected from experiencing or feeling unconditional love and self-acceptance. Each person will grow to develop their own ego defense mechanisms that reinforce the experiences of separation, which take us away from giving or receiving unconditional love. When we live in fear, our body constricts and we hold back our heart, suppressing our feelings, withholding authentic and truthful communication, which increases emotional and mental pain. When we live in a fearful state, our body will constrict from tension, it will contract away from giving and receiving unconditional love, and this denial of self-love is the main cause of continuing to experience and accumulate emotional pain. Our beliefs around family and our connections to family lineages will give important insight and clues to the negative core beliefs and wounds that we are struggling with that we have inherited from the false parent. The false parent is the main victimizer archetype that is used to create pain and trauma in the child, when that child is totally dependent upon that adult person. When abuse is suffered in childhood, destructive attachments and negative bonds are formed within that child that carry into adulthood, if they are not cleared. To free the body, mind, emotions and spirit from the bondage of trauma induced by parents or others when we were children, we must take responsibility to learn how to love ourselves and unconditionally forgive what has happened to us. This action dissolves the causality and the consequential effects, as well as later entanglements that this pain has created throughout the child's timeline, all the way into adulthood. If we hold a vision of humanity as eternal souls coming into the material reality to learn lessons to grow and purify ourselves spiritually, it is easier to see that most people have forgotten who they really are as they are wearing many false identity masks. It is rare today to meet with completely honest, balanced and authentic people. Thus in this reflection, we may have forgotten who we really are and are still bargaining away our soul. The core wound we hide from is the shock and trauma we experience when we feel separated from unconditional love. This core wound organizes our ego identification in ways to help us feel more safe in the world, many times draining away our creativity, love and sexual connections. Overcoming our resistance to face inner pain or fear requires that we undergo the dark night of the soul process so we can experience the direct knowledge that we can come through our fear and pain, and become fully connected to experience the state of unconditional love. Many people require a spiritual crisis, which starts as a life crisis of some kind, in order to get to the level of desperation that pushes them to let go of everything fully. In this phase of letting go, going past the fear, they find themselves in a new state of awareness with an open-heartedness that releases the floodgates of unconditional love, compassion and empathy. When we resist the emotional and spiritual process required to address our hidden core wound and pain, it can occupy us for many years in seeking psychological, emotional and spiritual healing work. The core wound is most commonly generated in the pre-verbal or non-verbal areas of the brain, body and consciousness, thus it is greatly entwined with the physical body, CNS, as well as the functioning of the three layers of ego. If there is no self-awareness of the pain held in the triggering of this core wound, the wound takes over the body and runs on automatic through the nervous system and brain. To bring unconditional love and stabilize it into our body and conscious awareness, we need to identify the organizing belief systems that trigger our core pain. We must remember who we are in our spiritual essence, our sense of true core self, before we took on the fear-based belief that we were separated from love. If we are willing to feel the wound that led to the pain generated from our separation from unconditional love, this reveals to us where the wound is located in our body, or where the black emptiness resides. Our core wounds manifest as an aching emptiness or black hole somewhere in our body, usually found in the heart center. Once identified, the black holes of pain need to be filled with the light of unconditional love and forgiveness. To go beyond core fears and recover the core self, this quick exercise may be helpful. Source: the belief system, identity: the negative belief system that drives the core wound, that spreads emotional and mental pain and leaves fear residue and constriction sensations in your body. Connect to your physical body, identify where the core pain or aching wound can be felt in your body and body parts. Pay attention and observe how your body constricts and closes down in fear when you are feeling your core pain or core wound. Observe the fear, witness, stay present to the core fear and pain without trying to change it or shift it immediately. Observe it as being connected to your physical self, your biological self. Do not try to make the fear or wound as something positive, or bargain it away. Just allow yourself to be fully present with the fear and pain, without believing it to be true. Call it out for what it is, the negative ego or predator mind. Experience vulnerability while feeling pain. Be open to feel the vulnerability that pain may make you feel, without assigning any labels or value of good or bad. Stay present to experience unbearable pain as an energy, thought form and vibration, staying as open as you can to witness it in your body. If you can focus on the feeling of being vulnerable, allow yourself to be fully innocent, knowing that being comfortable with emotional vulnerability is a great strength. Invite an unconditional love. Bring to mind and imagine yourself in your eternal spirit body before this core wound, pain and the negative beliefs existed. In your mind, completely surround the fear, void, blackness, in the body, and area of pain with the unconditional love, light and power of the crystal star and Godhead. See your entire body lit up in God's sovereign free imagery, enlightened, free and liberated from pain. Most people fear that if they let go of their personality structure, they will not exist. Primal fear surfaces when we get close to our true spiritual essence and core self, because it is the ego death, and the ego mind has programs that act as defense and survival mechanisms. The negative ego will fight to protect its survival. It will use every trick and deception to prevent you from discovering your true core self and authentic nature. Do not be afraid to face it head on. Our spiritual source is the true power on our side, and it is important to remember this fact when the mind attacks with fears and phobias. In order to transcend the fear and mental body attacks, stay in the present moment and remain formless and transparent, as the compassionate witness. The more we practice this exercise in disciplining our negative ego from going into its mental attack loops, the easier it gets, as we gain spiritual strength. We gain incredible strength when unconditional love is reborn as our new unifying principle, our true core self, spiritual power and human dignity surfaces, and we are no longer shattered and overwhelmed by life's circumstances. As we develop to become more grounded in our true spiritual core, the false identity will stay in the background of awareness, but it ceases to be the driving force of our life any longer. When our true spiritual core self and spiritual connection is restored through consistent devoted attention, it automatically weakens the power of core fears and the ego defense mechanisms. When our focus and attention is consistently relaxed and expansive, we are no longer constricted and limited by the framework of the automatic habits set in place by the negative ego mental body construct. Unconditional loving presence in the now moment, and learning to relax and allow whatever emotional material is surfacing in our awareness, is the primary inner spiritual work we need to do. Each emotional layer that requires healing must be processed in its own order and timing. When we feel strong enough to stay open and vulnerable to feeling and witnessing the emotional pain and trauma that is in core wounding. Staying open and willing to process personal emotional pain may happen for extended periods of time in order for the emotional imprint and residue to completely release from the body. Emotional pain and trauma is like a black seed embedded in the energetic matrix and cell memory of the body. Each of these emotional seeds have a lifespan from the accumulated experiences that gathered that particular emotional theme. With consistent loving attention, kindness and self-care, the emotional seeds of pain will complete their lifespan and it will pass away forever, clearing away and healing the layers of the body. The people that remain in the third-dimensional consciousness during this shift will find themselves increasingly uncomfortable, extremely pressurized and unhappy. Thus, many will feel the squeezing pressure to transform rapidly through the alchemical theme of polarity synthesis, which helps to bring completion to these old karmic patterns from the past, if we are willing to let them go. This purging process will add or subtract the required blueprint patterns that we may need to meet these new coordinates in the Earth grid, and to help clear out the unstable or dark force influence in our lives. We are being purged deeply and the remaining content is processed into higher light and consciousness, to be stabilized and synthesized into the body, in order to improve energetic coherence and recover our core self. Our responsibility now is to practice unconditional love to all that we see, and to see everything and everyone around us as connected to the unified whole. At the same time, we make clear intentions of where we place our consent, in higher authority. This loving intention and compassionate practice will keep our heart open and aligned to the source field, and will make the transition much more comfortable. In love and service. Lisa.